pandemic, people were still struggling with housing, we're still struggling with wages, we're still struggling with health-related problems.
Some of the most marginalized communities across the state of California that helped the rest of us during the course of the pandemic were most exposed to the virus. They stocked our shelves, they picked our food, they drove those buses, they showed up in hospitals.
When the pandemic hit, they didn't exactly know where they can get resources, but they had a vision of how those resources should be getting to people. We're not just doing outreach, we're also building a community.
Yes. No, I did not want this, damn it. I wanted the other one.
At Sierra Health, our goal is really creating deep, meaningful, and authentic relationships with community-based nonprofits around social justice and racial equity, particularly as it relates to health. One of those groups is known to us as CAPS, which is a coalition advocating for pesticide safety. And while the focus is usually around pesticide exposure to COVID is not all that different. Exposure to it can be harmful to your health.
COVID in the house.
There are ways to protect yourself. There's a level of advocacy that's needed to gain access to the resources you need to actually do so. Their work now around COVID really builds off of the work that...
So welcome YouTube. For those of you that are familiar with this channel, you know we make documentaries with leading cosmologists about competing models of what happened at or even before the Big Bang. Now, obviously, during the pandemic, I've not been able to travel, so we haven't been able to shoot more interviews for our Before the Big Bang series. But today, we are incredibly fortunate to be able to host a discussion between two of our biggest stars, perhaps the biggest names in cosmology today. And I'll introduce our guests in just a moment.
But I got Penn's role in the Pokeball.
Now, the idea that the universe underwent an incredibly rapid growth spurt called inflation dominates cosmology today. And whilst most cosmologists reject inflation, some are uncomfortable with multiverse and infinities it seems to produce. Others have suggested alternative schemes to inflation, and they're often cyclic cosmologies. So do we have to choose between an inflationary multiverse and a cyclic cosmology? I think both are absolutely mind-blowing. So we're so lucky to have with us today to explore these options the founder of inflationary cosmology, Alan Guth. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you.
The Nobel
Glad to be here.
It's like
and also,
Mill-Round Index.
inflation's
You get out
probably
there
most
and it's
prominent
like,
challenger,
scientists
the
teaching
2020
kids.
Nobel laureate
Black
physics,
hole in the
Sir
SCP
Roger
Foundation
Penrose.
for
Welcome,
the
Sir
NP
Roger.
problem guy.
My
I got all I need.
And I believe it's happy birthday.
So
Do you have your
send
birthday
him
this
in,
week,
do
right?
some calc.
Yeah, just a few days ago, yes.
Over the house,
Okay.
the pipes,
Now, of
and
course, we're going to be talking about some of the
vacuums.
biggest issues we can imagine. What triggered the Big Bang? Is the universe infinite in space and time? Are there many
cyclical
Big
universe.
Bangs? But before
The
we get into the
infinity
heavy
on both
stuff, perhaps
planes
Roger, you
is
could
their
just
SAM,
start us off
and
with
becomes more
how
congruent
did you
at
learn that you had won the
polarized.
Nobel Prize? Did they
Carl
give you an
Sagan
inkling? Was
universe
it
law
out the
being
blue?
internal in the pipe. So you
Well,
can
it
say
was
between
pretty well
A
out of
and
the
B,
blue. I
it
was
could
having
be
a shower,
curved,
and then
flat
the phone rang.
curved, or
And that
saddled
was
for
my
Mario.
PA,
Well, Mario
Winter,
with the star
who said
riding
she got some
Yoshi, or just
mysterious
being Mario. Being
message from
gravity
Sweden.
drops over
And
X.
should she be allowed to
being
give
a
my
multiverse
phone
of
number to
different
them, which she doesn't
cyclicals.
normally do, you see. But then we thought maybe she should. And
Between
I got phoned a little bit later, I think.
neutrino was gonna, or Durium was gonna, neutrino was
I
gonna
got a
give
message eventually from the president
in
of
this
the
physical frame,
Swedish Academy. And he started talking to me, and then he said, well, wait a minute.
Tritium.
And he
In
sort of stopped,
combinations,
and the phone went
pressure
completely
densities,
dead.
gravity waves,
Well, I
pockets,
mean, it was dead only because it
gravitational
wasn't there.
models,
And so I
and
waited,
expand that out to helium, condition
waited.
fusion
I sort
at
of got a
those
bit fed up,
levels,
so I hung
or
up.
the vacuum pipes
But then the
to
phone rang a bit
separate
later,
temperature,
and he did
get an
reveal
inverted
that
Kelcon. I got feed and speed on the
half the Nobel Prize
diagram,
for
and
physics.
saw
And the
come
other, he did, I
stone
don't
mill,
think he told
or
me
the
who
whole
the other
stone
two
mill
were
went
at that
black
point,
hole.
because he was
It's
still
like this all
communicating with them. That
multi-verse
was the
verse
delay.
on
I
tracks
think
that I
he was trying to
run.
get through to California, which, of course, the time zone was a little bit uncomfortable.
The overhead looks like a
in
big
relation
spaghetti
to
monster
time,
at the end of the day.
So it was in the morning sometime. I can't remember exactly what time it was. He phoned, but it was.
So you won the Nobel Prize for your work on black holes, and that obviously led to
Stone mill mouse,
the famous
utopia,
singularity theorem
marshmallow,
that you then worked
LSD,
with Stephen Hawking with.
marshmallow.
Now, some people have said that these theorems
You're in
prove
it.
an
If
absolute beginning
I'm
of time, or that
the
physics breaks
LSZ,
down
you
at the
add
Big Bang. And
Alan,
others have
or
said, well, it's more of a signpost
this
to
individually
new
both
physics.
probably works very well.
Which would you say it is,
And I'm
Roger?
sure to the rebuttal
Well,
on
certainly
the
new
moves,
physics. I mean, people
black, white, black,
time,
white, black, white, black, white.
The theorem that particularly was what was responsible for the Nobel Prize was something that I did in 1964. It was published in 65, and I gave a talk about it in 64 in King's College London, which was this singularity theorem.
Black holes are hard. They're definitely going to need to know these ones.
The
They're
Nobel Prize was
lens and things.
Supposed to be for the
robust
prediction that black holes are a robust consequence of general relativity.
Like what
Actually,
you
it
got
wasn't
here,
quite what I did. It was to show that singularity
on the rabbit trap that never happens.
This robust prediction. That if you have a collapse, and so long as you don't have negative energy fluxes, then you're inevitably going to get some problem.
I usually try the one that pops
this
up
is more or less
inverse
at
for
the
the kid
time,
that
just a
doesn't
little
get the
later,
class,
when quasars had been found,
the hard way.
and people were very puzzled about the enormous emissions
like
of
rabbits
energy.
and TV and.
Of course, black hole wasn't obviously a source of enormous amount of energy, and it was clear that you could have very wild things going on during the collapse, and as long as it wasn't spherically symmetrical. If it's spherically symmetrical, then you wouldn't get radiation coming out of it, and so what information would come out anyway? So I did have to treat the situation when it was irregular. That was the whole point. There was a paper
so the
in
classroom, to me, when I watched those lectures, became something useful no matter what I ever was going to teach.
They discussed the collapse of a dust
wound up
cloud.
being that student got struck by lightning that day in that classroom.
It was
Maybe
actually
later on, hopefully later on.
They didn't describe it that way.
By Hubble 45 on that incident gave me specific types of collisions of calcium and plutonium-based fluvium. But obviously, how we talk about the process
and
is a
the
singularity.
other was that it was exactly spherically symmetrical, so everything was focused towards the center.
Heating
so
mantles,
no pressure,
not a hadron
everything
collider
towards
for
the
that
center. It's
collision.
not surprising
So some things are out of
that
the
you
limit.
get a sort of infinite density at that point. But the normal view that's an artifact introduce any kind of irregularities that swirl around and perhaps come swishing out again. And in fact, there was a paper by Lisius and Kalatnikov, which had been published.
What I keep in the shelf when I hit that simulator build on the Foundation game,
and
SCP Foundation game.
But in
Fun.
a generic
You get some kids playing it,
not
not
get
Pensville playing it. Yeah, first thing you walk in on the Foundation, there's a chalk whiteboard with some
notice there was actually a
it
mistake, which I think Belinsky noticed later on.
Could go
But I
neutrino,
see it a mistake. I
electron
just
tau,
wasn't
anti-electron, neutrino
arguments
tau
they
from
were using
relative, the collision,
were particularly
the
robust.
time and matter.
And I started thinking about it afresh, using
the
different
collision be the
methods
result
that I'd been playing with for other
have
reasons.
frames relative, not necessarily
general
one straight line,
space-times,
because it's hard
and
to
how if you have
gotta
a future
generalize it under
of a
something.
region,
People
what
beat
does it
hearts
what
under
does
an
its
average of
boundary look
spectrums
like?
and
And that was
sectors.
the key thing in this discussion.
Hit you in the
Right,
simulator,
led to the
and now
singularities,
generally say
and then
averages
Hawking
of the statistics, say
developed that to the
bigger,
singularities
smaller,
of the Big
elephants
Bang.
to mouse,
And then, now
evolution
Stephen did
M1,
say, well, this
M2,
proves
Z,
the universe had a
prime,
beginning. Do
Z
you
prime.
think it does prove that?
E,
Well, you see, my
lambda,
views somewhat shifted since
E2,
that time.
chessboard.
I certainly,
It's a cyclical
yeah, he picked up,
multiverse on
unlike in the movie when he allegedly went to this talk of mine in London, that's not the
7
case.
minutes in a row.
But they gave a repeat in Cambridge, which was a few months later, at Dennis Sharma's request.
For me, again,
And
I haven't
Stephen
seen
was
Alan's work.
present
I
there,
don't know
and in
yet.
fact,
Like I
we
said,
had
in
a
the
long
classroom,
discussion
repeat that
with
experiment for
Stephen
45 minutes.
and
45 minutes
George Ellis, I
is
think, was
the
there
class
also. He
that
said he
comes
was there.
up
And
in
we discussed
training.
the techniques that I'd been using, and Stephen very quickly picked up on these techniques and almost immediately applied the
teacher get
particular
the
theorem I
bundle,
had to a
turn,
cosmological
nerd, the
situation.
case study.
But that was a rather
Hopefully,
special
the
case.
theory works.
And then he
Go Senate
generalized these
inside there
techniques
for a
also
whole town on Berkeley's
developed
final
that
equation,
switch,
but I might sprinkle that one in there to
eliminated some
help.
of the ways out you might have of
5
evading
questions. Well,
singularity
you have 2020.
and applying it to the Big Bang,
Infinity
which was
hot,
basically, and then we got
integral,
together and wrote
infinity
a
large,
paper
infinity small,
jointly, which more or less
2020,
covered all the results that
minus
he
X,
had previously.
bracket X,
Now the thing
bracket.
was,
Being
with
five
the
5-minute
Big Bang,
questions that the kids got to
it
run
was
through
that
arc
if you
sine,
had a-
parentheses,
maybe a
sine,
collapse
dx.
before,
I mean, so
which
that's
then
this.
swirled
But
around
our
in some
consulate
complicated
is
way and
infinity
comes
hot,
swishing out
infinity
again.
cold for
that couldn't
right
happen
now,
without violating
quantum
serious
time,
energy
in
conditions. So you'd have to
quantum
have
time,
negative energies or
with
something like that, which were very
the
unrealistic
bracket of X
to have such a
being our
situation.
limit,
So it
and
more or less
whatever
showed
we
you
talk
couldn't have a
about
bounce,
the
which did
multiverse
not
systems, which
have
will
some
inevitably be anybody's house
deviation
by design.
standard
Topology is
physics
going to make
way.
a coastline,
But I was very
not squared
puzzled
circle
about it for a long time. I
problem
remember
of perfect entropy.
realizing that there are all sorts of
matter
singular states you could have, and there are many
jet
solutions in
stream,
general relativity of all
hurricane
sorts of
forecasting
complications.
on scale
And I
time,
couldn't see why the
multiverse
cosmologists didn't consider all
cyclicals
these
that
things. And I remember
have
at
copper,
the time as
other
one was briefly in
systems,
Princeton,
mantle core
and there was a
differentials.
meeting
Well, it was close to there, volcano, and these
Hoboken, New
things are
Jersey,
connected in those times.
which were
and,
quite frequent
still got both of them on
and
dirt.
various cars from Princeton,
So you hit it in Calculus
Syracuse,
1 lecture
drive off to this meeting,
with the
and I noticed in the back of one of these
45,
cars
and then it turns into a few things, but
Jim Peebles. And so I asked him
the
this
A
question. I said, why
point to
don't you
B point on
cosmologists
that stick that you
consider
first
all
teach
these other
is a
possibilities?
dimensional
You just stick
analysis
with this
of fish, pounds,
simple,
1 pound,
very
2
uniform
pounds, 3
situation.
pounds,
Why
three
don't you look
pounders
at all
in a
these
row
others?
that
And
day,
he just looked at me
add
and
another
said,
bracket on
because
a
the
neural
universe
net
is not like
pattern.
that.
Now that in
My
itself
God, it's
become a
not, is
one
it?
brick,
I think he
a
was
byte,
referring to the cosmic microwave background,
positive as
which
hot
is
charge is
extremely
a fishing
uniform,
analysis, but
and therefore
maybe
that
missing
suggests
on
that the
the,
universe was very uniform.
the
So
maintenance
that I
guy that
began
forgot to do
worrying
the tool
about
cabinet check
why the
every
Big Bang
so
was
many
so
cases, and then the
different
saw goes
from
walking
all
away.
these other possibilities.
Let me interrupt you a little bit there, Roger. I just want to sort of get
It's
Alan
not 0, it's
involved
now
here.
1. It has
So
a
before we go
temperature at
into
3.145,
exciting things about what created the universe
1.141,
to be so homogeneous,
414
just
infinity
your take
types
on
of symbols
singularities,
that
Alan.
do it. But,
do you think they tell us the universe had a beginning,
like
or
you
the
get
physics
something
break
backwards,
down, or what
lambda,
do they tell us?
sigma, well the E, that's a fancy one.
Well, I think the singularities of these
Got
singularity
that kind of
theorems
squishy bit
are
on the bottom before you
unambiguously
get the
theorems of
lambda
classical general
make
relativity.
E2 again.
While I think none of us really believe
Switched
that
off into the
classical general
pounds.
relativity is the final word, and certainly under the conditions where one is near one of these singularities, that's precisely where we would expect corrections from some quantum
Of course,
theory
this
of
chess
gravity
game is,
to come in.
in the end, both of them are
So
going to walk
I
out
view
with their
these
house. They're going to
singularities
stay systems
as
and
essentially
unless
signposts
it turns
of where
into
we know we have to start
off
worrying
of the
about
farm.
about
Yes,
quantum gravity.
mathematically,
And since we
I could
don't
slide
really
into
have
Bernoulli.
a
We could, you
full
hit,
theory
you
of
hit
quantum
S.E.
gravity,
Penzrel hitting Oilers.
the bottom
or
line really is I think we don't really know what happens
Bell's,
when the classical theory
Muskowski in
approaches
space
the
on Ricci
singularity.
tensor to field theory. It's
And
like
you had your own
equations
theorem
on that thing
that
going
I
to be
keep
hangman
getting emails
physics
about.
out here.
And then
Physicists
Ford
are
gave the
in it.
Vilenka theorem. I presume you
All the
do too.
headstones and-
People are saying, well, that also proves the same thing as Penrose Hawking. What
Right,
does
right.
it prove?
Yeah, no, that's right. It proves that the expanding
As far
era
as I
of
believe from
inflation that
here,
we're
it
part
goes
of
down. I don't know. I
must
heard he
have
was
passed
a
boundary
mathematician, right, Penn?
That
in the black
does not
hole.
necessarily mean the universe had a beginning. And in fact, I don't know if I'll have time to talk about this or not. My favorite picture of the global
Walk out of bed,
structure
multiverse,
of
cyclical
existence
universe expert.
is now something which I really got from Sean Carroll, something that
Some
we
kids
call the
don't.
two-headed arrow of
You
time.
just pick out by the math hot
The
cold.
idea
This
that the
one works
universe is
is
eternal,
whoa, this one not.
but that there's a mid-region where
about
the
that.
arrow of time is essentially
Here,
ill-defined.
happy to play
To
E2
the
for
future
you.
of that, the arrow of time points to the future, but to the past of that, the arrow of time points to the past.
Yes.
So
And
there's
we
a
haven't gotten
two-headed
off
arrow
far
of
out.
time.
We
So
usually
the arrow of
go
time
to
is defined almost
Leonard,
everywhere
talk
except in
teacher,
this mid-region.
and this
but
is
points
he's
in
my
opposite
young gun,
directions.
big guy.
And they're never
He
the
hits on the
beginning,
number. Like I said, it looks like
or
Penzrel's
real
work,
singularity.
old hand
So
making the board
that's obviously,
committee.
we're going to come off
lecture.
because one of Roger's key complaints
He's
is
got
that
the math
inflation
house in
can't
there to
solve
keep
the
the
problem
thing
of low
going,
entropy,
pump up, never
and
diminish the
he's got
boss
his
in
own
here
scheme,
for old
which we're going
schoolers
to talk
because,
about.
like I
But
said,
before we get to
I'm
that, why don't
playing
you tell us what the
usually
problems that inflation
something in this
is thought to
neighborhood
solve? Why
by
are
what the standard
cosmologists so
would look like.
excited
So,
about
how do
inflation?
I do that? Toss a marshmallow
What are
like
these
Penzrel and
problems
tell you,
of
go
the
ahead,
Big Bang
kick
that
him around,
inflation is
yell
thought
at
to
him.
solve?
Right. There are 2 or 3 of them, depending on how one counts. And
A little
what
potato
includes.
soup lady math problem, brother.
one
It's going to come
key
up in eminent domain. What do we do? What's the
issue that have been considered a problem for the conventional
soldier's
Big
going to want
Bang
to retire
theory,
at some point in time?
that inflation
Math
solves
or otherwise,
is something called the
225
flatness
terminals
problem.
on the
The
multiverse,
question of
cyclical
why
universe.
the universe is so close to
Game
being
theory.
flat in the sense of Euclidean, especially at very, very early times.
I can set up
because the
chess pieces
universe,
any way I want. The game,
had to
just
have been
because it's chess,
incredibly
doesn't mean I
close to flat
couldn't
at
just do
early
code with
times
4
to be
individual
even
chess
reasonably close
pieces
to
move
flat
around any
today.
36
That's just the way
combination
the evolution
around
according
that
to
board
general
that does it one
relativity,
move
works.
in a gambit phase of
So
the
one
king's
way of
gambit.
phrasing this
Given it's
flatness
on this
problem
board.
is that
inside
about
of the
1
system,
second
designed a
after
certain way
what's
with
called
its
the Big
in the
Bang,
pipes trajectory, the Ouija board, spell it out. I
had
only
to
get a
have
letter
a
inside here,
relationship
a
between
squared
its,
plus b
mass
squared
density and its
equal.
expansion
Hit the
rate,
yes button.
which held to 15 decimal places, which means that if you tell me what
That's
expansion
the
rate you're
physical
talking about,
version of the Mason.
I can tell
So
you what
that's
the
what I did.
density
I
is
went
to
local
15
about the
decimal places.
topology and Bernoulli
And that's rather extraordinary. And the
And
conventional
so that
Big
gave
Bang
me
theory
something that wasn't
required
particle
this
when
precise equality to
you
get
got
to
Mario.
where we are today. But there was nothing in
Because,
the
well, he did the
conventional Big
maps.
Bang
He did the
theory to
fingers that did
explain
the maps.
how
So
we
I'll
got
let
to
him
that
have it there.
situation. So it seemed
Mario.
like a tremendous mystery.
Princess Peach
But inflation
and
solves
the pearl
inflation
necklace you're trying to give her
the
over
mass
here.
density of the
Penrose
universe
work on
to
small scale
just
on
the right
blast.
value.
You know,
that
give you
this
forward
condition
CT
requires.
paradox, right?
It's
While you doing the dance.
marvelous solution to the problem.
And one
Crystal
of the others
theory is
is the
complex.
origin of structure, right?
That's right. One of the others is the origin of structure. I was going to talk about the horizon
Oh,
problem.
go for it. Yeah, of course.
Which I think logically comes first. Another key problem is what is called the
It's easy
horizon
because
problem,
Nobel hit 2020.
which
Like I said,
is
that
related to the fact
hit
that
every
in
one of my kids
conventional
now.
cosmology,
Check out
the
Nobel
early
by
universe
terms on
expands
the
so quickly
system,
that
and
the
the
different
most
pieces of it
local
have no
year is
time
going
to
to come up in the
communicate in any way
sectors
with each other,
for the standard
even at
on
the speed of
momentum.
light. They
So.
really are what is
And then
called in
the
physics
course
causally
thesis winds up being
disconnected.
bar, right? So
In
I
the
got him out
context
here.
of
If
the
in his
conventional
class he's doing good, or if in his
Big
class
Bang
it would
model.
come up, right? We
Yet
would see it
nonetheless,
too. We
when
would be
look
like,
at
hey,
it
pass
on
the
the
rough.
background radiation, we see that it's uniform in temperature in all
Go
directions.
run a little fast for
to
your
an
age
accuracy of
bracket,
about
buddy.
1 part in 100,000. Incredible uniformity. But in the conventional Big Bang theory, the
still eat
photons
two for
coming
you.
from that way had no way of knowing anything
Like I
about
said, as long as you
photons
do
coming from
marshmallow,
the other way.
you got my. It's like I got
Inflation
to
solves
Somebody
that
did what? They
by
broke into
starting
Penrose's
with the
house and
universe
decided
being
to
much,
do
much
what?
smaller than it would have been in conventional cosmology.
If bar.
The uniformity can be established before inflation sets in. And then inflation takes a tiny speck,
Catch you
which
next
has
one, guys.
already been